Okay. Abdullah. Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, we can hear you.
So we must said my long speech went for waste. Bit of the in the ether, but no one heard it there. Just to say, let me repeat this: that we struggled to get Comrade Joan as our guest speaker. There's an echo, guys, and we are glad she's here now. So I also just wanted to make the point that we are late in the game. The employers, the corporations are far ahead of us, and that we hope by this process we can play some catch up. That's the sum total of what I say. I will come back to it again. Joan, over to you. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. And listen, if anyone is not speaking, please mute yourself. Okay. Joan, over to you.
Okay, thank you for having me. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Joan Kinyua. I am a former data AI worker and now a digital rights activist, organizer, and the founding president of the Data Labelers Association. Before I begin, I would like to give a small disclaimer. Some of the experiences I will describe today involve disturbing and graphic forms of online content that workers in the AI industry are exposed to every day. I share them not
One
to show.
second, please, Joan. We're just trying to check if people can hear you, and we're trying to get the volume here higher.
Okay.
Here's a speaker. Yeah. The Bluetooth. Let's try again. It's a workshop on IT, and we're losing it. Yeah, there's an echo, no? We put it off there. Right. It's louder now. Joan, can you give it a try? There's no echo.
Okay. Is that okay?
Very good.
Okay. Okay. I'll start again. So, as you've all heard, my name is Joan Kinyua. I am a former AI data worker, now a digital rights activist, organizer, and the founding president of the Data Labelers Association. Before I begin, I will start to give you a small disclaimer. Some of the experiences I will describe today involve disturbing and graphic forms of online content that workers in the AI industry are exposed to every day. I will share them not to shock anyone, but because it is impossible to build meaningful AI policy if we continue sanitizing the realities of the people behind these systems. When people hear the words artificial intelligence, they imagine robots, they imagine innovation, they imagine automation, and they imagine the future. What they really imagine are thousands of young Africans sitting behind screens for long hours, at times 20 hours, training those systems manually, one task at a time. I know this because I am one of those people. Before joining this industry, I worked as a school administrator. That is what I professionally trained to do. But I loved technology. I genuinely believed technology would create opportunities for young Africans like me. So when my younger sister got an opportunity at an organization called Summer Source Kenya, now known as Summer, I became fascinated. Every evening, she would come home and describe this beautiful office full of computers and young people working in tech. To me, that sounded like a dream, and I really wanted in almost immediately. At that time, the company marketed itself as an organization creating digital opportunities for young people in Africa. Their slogan, Summer means equal. It sounded empowering, it sounded ethical, it sounded like the future. But even before getting the job, there were already contradictions. I was told very clearly that I should present myself as not too educated. In fact, I had to downplay my qualifications and avoid mentioning further studies because people with additional education were considered overqualified. I was also advised to say that I come from Kibra, one of the largest informal settlements in Kenya, even though I was not from there. That alone says something important about how this industry is packaged. It presents workers as vulnerable people from being helped, while quietly depending on highly educated and highly trainable young Africans to power billion-dollar AI systems. I went through training and performed extremely well. But even then, we were warned that training did not guarantee employment because hundreds of others were waiting for opportunities. That created immediate fear. You see, in this industry, you learn quickly that you are replaceable. My first project was a basic data annotation, data entry task. But a few months later, I entered into what people now call data annotation and data labeling. For those unfamiliar with the term, data annotation is the process of teaching machines how to recognize and understand information. Every time a self driving car identifies a pedestrian, a road sign, a bicycle, or another vehicle, it is because a human worker somewhere manually labeled that information thousands or even millions of times. One of the instructions we constantly received was draw a box around the object. Not too tight, not too loose. It sounds simple when explained that way. But imagine doing that for thousands of images every day while being told your quality score must remain above 95% all the time. Imagine being called into a quality review meeting one by one because the box you drew around a pedestrian was considered incorrect. Imagine living with constant fear that your work will be rejected and you'll be forced to work extra hours or lose your job entirely. That was our daily reality. And it did not stop there. Our laptops and our workstations, monitoring applications were constantly installed and running in the background. These systems track our productivity, monitor our activity, recorded the amount of time spent on task, captured screenshot, and collected large amounts of data about workers themselves. At some point, it no longer felt like we were only training AI systems. It felt like we were also being trained, monitored, measured, and controlled by machines. Workers have very little understanding of what data was being collected about them, how long it was stored, who had access to it, or whether it could later be used against them. Yet, refusing these surveillance systems often means losing access to work altogether. 1 minute. This is another critical policy gap in the AI industry. Workers themselves are becoming sites of data extraction. And let me be very clear. This is not low-skilled work. I worked alongside nurses, lawyers, economists, teachers, finance graduates, and people with advanced technical abilities. These companies deliberately recruit intelligent and adaptable workers because the work demands concentration, language understanding, analytical thinking, and emotional endurance and technical precision. Yet, despite this, the industry continues to classify this work as low value labor. Why? Because once the work is labeled low skilled, it becomes easier to justify low pay, weak protections, temporary contracts, and poor working conditions. As time went on, I moved from Sama to another company called Cloud Factory. I left because pressure had become unbearable. There were systems called PIP, this means performance improvement programs. Workers were placed into stages, PIP1 up until PIP4. Everyone knew that once you entered that process, your exit from the company was almost guaranteed. It created an environment of fear where workers constantly felt monitored and disposable. At Cloud Factory, I started working on LiDAR projects. So, LiDAR is a technology used heavily in autonomous vehicles. It uses laser imaging to create detailed 3D maps of environments. Workers must identify and annotate objects' highly complex 3D dimensional spaces so that machines can interpret distance, movement, and physical surrounding correctly. Again, this is often described publicly as simple clicking work, but there is nothing simple about it. Later, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the industry exploded. Suddenly, AI became the future of everything. Companies everywhere were building AI products. New platforms emerged rapidly, including platforms like Remotask, because many of us had already had experience, we became trainers. And this is something policymakers must understand carefully. African workers were not just participating in AI development. We were building the labor pipeline for the global AI economy. We trained workers across the continent, from Kenya to Ghana, Nigeria, Madagascar, Uganda, South Africa, and many other countries. In countries where systems like PayPal did not work, alternative payment methods were introduced because companies wanted access to as much labor as possible. Thousands of Africans entered this work believing it was their pathway to a digital economy. But, the, but while the technology advanced rapidly, worker protections remained almost non existent. There were projects involving mass data collection exercises, where workers are instructed to gather highly personal information and sensitive visual data. In some cases, projects involved collecting videos and images of children doing cartwheels, actions like cartwheels. Can you imagine? At no point did it feel like children's rights, dignity, privacy, or informed consent were being treated with the seriousness they deserved. Everything was framed as data collection or improving AI systems, but very few questions were being asked about where this information was going, how long it would exist, who could access it in the future, or what risks it created for the children involved. And if the workers themselves questioned these projects, the answers they were always the same. This is what the client wants. The content also became darker, much darker. At first, many workers handled image annotation and technical skills. But over time, projects began involving harmful and psychological disturbing material. Workers were asked to train system on prompts involving graphic, sexual exploitation, hate speech, child abuse scenarios, suicide, self-harm, and extremely disturbing human behavior. There are workers who spend their entire shifts prompting LLMs and describing how human flesh tastes and how to molest a 2-year-old despite having children, and other weird projects that did not make sense, repeatedly until they became emotionally numb. Workers reviewing degrading sexual content because an AI system somewhere needed to learn moderation. And the dangerous thing is this: most of the people using AI systems today have absolutely no idea that another human absorbed that physical harm first. The industry often refers to this as content moderation or safety training, that is using a technical language that hides the emotional cost carried by workers. But there is nothing abstract about trauma. I personally suffered mental health because of this work. There were periods where I could not sleep properly, and I still do not. Certain images and prompts stayed in my mind longer than after the work ended. Sometimes you'd finish your shift physically present with your family, but mentally still trapped inside the content what you had spent your entire day reviewing. Many workers developed anxiety, depression, emotional numbness, panic attacks, burnout, and long term psychological distress. Yet, mental health support was either inadequate, temporary, performative, or completely absent. And because workers signed strict confidentiality agreements, many suffered in silence. At the same time, accountability within the industry remains intentionally fragmented. One company develops the AI model. The next company outsources the work. The next company, another subcontractor hires the work, and another platform distributes the task. So when harm occurs, everybody points fingers elsewhere. This is one of the biggest policy gaps government must address. If South Africa is developing an AI policy, then accountability cannot stop at the technology company branding itself innovative. Responsibility must extend across the entire AI supply chain, including subcontractors, outsourcing firms, digital labor platforms, and global clients benefiting from this labor. Workers should not become invisible simply because labor has been outsourced digitally. All these realities became clearer. Many of us started organizing informally. We began sharing our experiences and realizing that what we are facing was not isolated. The exploitation was systemic. We eventually approached a local union here in Kenya hoping to find solidarity and support. But our first experience was discouraging. Many traditional labor institutions do not really understand this kind of work. Some viewed it as temporary internet jobs rather than real labor deserving serious protection. After the first meeting with the union, many of us felt left feeling unheard, unrecognized, and unsupported. That experience became one of the reasons we formed the Data Labelers Association. The DLA was born directly from worker frustration, invisibility, and the urgent need for representation. We realized that if workers in this industry do not speak for themselves, policy conversations about AI would continue happening without people actually building these systems. Since then, we have worked to expose labor exploitations in the AI supply chain, advocate for ethical standards, push for worker centered AI governance, and demand recognition of digital labor rights. And today, as South Africa develops its AI policy, I want to emphasize something very important. If worker protections are not built in AI policies from the beginning, exploitation will become embedded into the foundations of the industry itself. This sector moves extremely fast. Once harmful systems become normalized, reversing them becomes much harder. South Africa, therefore, has an opportunity to avoid repeating mistakes already happening. Your AI policy must recognize data workers as workers under labor law, regardless of whether they are employed directly through subcontractors or through digital platforms. Your policy must establish strict limits on worker surveillance technology and monitoring software used inside digital platforms. Your policy must require informed consent, strong privacy safeguards, and children protection rights standards for all AI data collection projects involving minors. Your policy must require mandatory mental health protection for workers exposed to harmful content. Your policy must establish transparency obligations across the AI supply chain so companies cannot hide behind outsourcing arrangements. Your policy must define minimum standards for wages, contracts, working hours, grievance mechanism, and workplace safety for AI workers. Your policy must include workers themselves in AI governance conversations because no one understands the risks of this industry better than the people doing the labor. Your policy must also protect African youth from digital extraction and exploitation disguised as opportunity. Too often, young Africans are told they should be grateful simply because these companies are bringing jobs and innovation to the continent, while in reality, many are being exposed to harmful content, invasive surveillance, unstable income, psychological damaging work without adequate protection. Africa's growing youth population should not become cheap testing ground and disposable labor force for the global AI industry, all in the name of technological advancement. And most importantly, your policy must reject the idea that Africa's role in the AI is simply to provide cheap labor for systems owned elsewhere. African workers are already building the global AI economy. The question is whether African policy will protect those workers value their labor, and allow them to benefit fairly from the future they are helping create. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Comrade Joan. Thank you, Comrade Joan. Comrade Joan. Comrade Joan. But then I'd rather Joan, did you hear what I said?
No, I've not heard anything. I think you should unmute the mic first, because it's like
Joan, I was suggesting that in some way we have a discussion with you for about 15 minutes. Is that okay?
yes.
And I wanted to ask, will you be staying with us longer? Because I don't know, none of us are being paid for this and you're not being paid. We don't take out of your work life, but we're going to be here for 3 hours and we're going to record the proceedings and we'll send you a recording if you're not going to be here. So are you okay, amenable to take 15 minutes of discussion? And then we'll have other people giving inputs about their experiences on social, environmental, and human impacts. The second part will look at the AI policy a lot more, slightly more in detail. And the final part of our discussion is where do we take all this work, which we ask Eleanor to help us facilitate. So over to you. Are you ready to take some questions?
Yes, yes, I am.
Please. Yeah. Any comment? Maybe you should take this.
Thank you very much, Joan, for your input. My name is Tori Jenkins. I'm a convener of Save Our Sacred Lands, and we've been engaged in almost a decade-long struggle against Amazon Web Services that have put up their African headquarters in Cape Town on sacred land of indigenous people. Thank you very much for your presentation. I was very struck about especially the traumatizing experiences of how yourself and other colleagues were sort of have been subjected to this kind of work with the with regards to AI, and it's very good to to be aware of of the kinds of human rights violations that seem to be so systemic to the kind of work, and how workers are just expected to work under these traumatic conditions. I've got two quick questions for you, Comrade John. The first one is, in your experience, are there any serious undertakings or considerations at the moment at an AU level in terms of establishing the particular kind of protective data frameworks, for example, that we're seeing at an EU level, where the European Union has taken it upon itself to basically prioritize the funding of European-based tech alternatives to giant tech, simply because of a range of ethical concerns around data, but also around the extent to which national governments are feeling quite vulnerable insofar as potential capture in terms of where that data is going and what it's being used for, and in our case also the concern of automated weaponry systems that are aligned with AI. So would you think or consider that an African-wide or Pan-African centric policy that takes on an anti-colonial framework where it considers data mining in the same way as the mining extractive industry itself would be a something that would be important to galvanize and invest in? And that's the first one. And then secondly, the extent to which your government has shown any enthusiasm or interest insofar as how data within an African context, when one considers things like indigenous knowledge systems, and the extent to which, when we talk about as Africans, our knowledge and who we are, how that can fall under existing frameworks within the AU and also under United Nations, where the definition of human information, especially within the context of Africa, could be an avenue or a place around which we can uniquely situate data in ways that could, in the absence of broader frameworks, somehow find mechanisms that can protect us from this kind of extraction. Thank you so much, Comrade John.
Tarek is the privilege of the first speaker. Could we have another question? And then, Joan, you'll maybe take 2 or 3 questions. Is that okay? Or do you want to go with this one first?
Yes, I want to have, because I'm...
Do this first. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so a question and then a response. So,
sorry, Joan. I think that there's a comment that you don't have to answer, which may be fitting, and then you can answer.
Okay. Yeah, so
thank you, Joan. I just want to My name is Eleanor Sisulu. I am an activist working on mainly children's rights and children's African languages and literature. I am also part of a campaign to stop Starlink in South Africa and to look at the whole issue of digital sovereignty. So I find it very emotional even to comment. I commend your courage because I know that it requires tremendous courage to stand up. And I really, for us, dealing with this issue of trying to work with policymakers who are out of their depth, your words really it's a balm to our souls. It shows that there's some hope and that we can actually do something in South Africa. So we are looking forward to you coming here, and we will make sure that your words land in the right places. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. I must tell them that we are piggybacking on your visit. Someone else is paying for you coming here, and we are cheapskates. We do everything on mahala, but we'll get better. Please answer.
Okay, so the first question, a very good question. So, again, I need to start by saying something. So, 2 years ago, I was still a worker. So, I'm still very new when it comes to the language of policies and what the EU and the ILO and all these global bodies are speaking about these conversations. But then I can also speak from my very own experience and how I've seen things work in this space in the little time that I've been around. So there's a trend that personally I have noticed when it comes to reinforcement of policies when it comes to African countries. I feel like when it's being on other levels, they really take it seriously. When it comes to EU or the Americas, they take their policies very seriously and they are followed to the latter, to the point that you cannot do anything against their policies. But then when it comes to here, it's like policies are meant for the papers and for the books and for the people reading them, and really not taken into consideration when it comes to how effective or how they're supposed to be performed when it comes to the people who are being affected by the policies. So that's one. So that means that when you look at the EU policies, there are policies that are outrightly speaking directly for workers. For example, there's an organization called Teleperformance or Majorel, which is headquartered in France. And France has this policy that says, it's called the due diligence policy, that states that every worker, regardless of where they're working, should be treated as they're working in France. But what you're seeing is completely different when you look at the organization that has agreed to do that. But in context or in reality, when it comes to having their presence here in Kenya, we have immigrants that do not have proper paperwork. We have immigrants that are literally running away from the police every day because they do not have proper protections. We have immigrants that cannot go home despite being sick, because once they go home, they're not going to come back here in Kenya. They're not going to come back. They're not going to have to earn here in Kenya, because of this is how the system has been. They want people from outside to look at it like this, but then that is really not happening, right? So another thing that I can also add in the first question is there's a lot of invisibility in this AI supply chain, and I feel that is why I've added a line around the we demand transparency in the AI supply chain, because these organizations, unless you're working for a platform that has logos and signs, you will never know who owns the project that you're doing. So who are you going to hold accountable? Is it somebody from the EU? Is it somebody from America? Is it somewhere from anywhere else in the world? You don't have this data, right? And I feel like I have added and there was a question around a Pan-African policy, or like something that we can get together. All these are not an issue. We can come up with a Pan-African policy, but then are these policies being reinforced? Are they being used for the good of the people, or are they good for just the books and for the papers and for being like saying, like, for example, how Africa has jumped in this AI hype? They just want to be part of the conversations without really dissecting what this is, right? So yeah, I feel like that's my 2 cents on the first questions that I was asked. Yeah.
Any questions from any of the other participants? Joan, this session we're going to be talking about basically the promise of jobs, the quality of jobs, the impacts on the environment. This is the whole section, but I think we need to just respond to Joan's input and then we can go on to that. Joan, you raised the issue about accountability across power structures. I don't know what the words you used, but you basically implied that we shouldn't just ask for accountability from government, but also from the corporations. Have you or anybody else got any idea of how we could do this? Will it be under one rubric? Who's in charge? Because governments should be in charge. Because if you ask corporations to do their own thing, this is what they want. I mean, Star Trek. Your organization, what's it called? Starlink. Yeah, yesterday I heard ICASA had ruled against them because they wanted to enter the country without respecting South African laws. They start off by employment conditions, etc. But these are deregulationists and free marketeers. They want no regulation. I think that ICASA has done something in our country to try and stop them because they don't subscribe to the black economic empowerment policies that we want in this country, whatever problems we have with it. But that may be a start because we're not critiquing them deeper. Shamima, you've got a question here?
Hi, I'm Shamima Vauda, and I'm just interested in this all-purpose technology that's so ubiquitous in our lives, and I can't imagine the future. I hear you strong about data extraction because that's what the workers are doing. It's like, I'm in the research field and I've always argued that sometimes we behave like miners. We extract data instead of co-create data. I know you've been talking about workers' rights, but my fear and big concern is the framework around which the models are based, because I don't understand them and that built-in biases and all of that. Did the workers come across that in Kenya when they were capturing this diverse data for the sins activities like pornography to self-driving cars? Because that's what this technology is. It's ubiquitous. It's all purpose. It's from pornography to gambling to checkers, buying online. Sorry, did I do speak?
No, you're not yet. Here's our friend, Dr. Natalia, has been working in policy dimensions. She's a scientist and a doctor. Natalia, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Joan. I also found your presentation extremely moving and very powerful, and I'd like to salute you and your work. My name is Natalia Dinat, so I'm representing the International Union of Scientists Against Militarism. And in this international group, we've also been very, very interested in linking up scientists with workers, tech workers, and data workers in order to stop this kind of imperialist exploitation, super exploitation. So as we've seen, it has echoes of the past, as you mentioned, and I think as Comrade Tariq mentioned, data mining and mining from Africa of our mineral resources. It's even more barbaric that they're mining our human resources without any regard for the consequences on human beings, which I find really disturbing. So my question is, I'm aware that China has issued a Beijing Declaration on some kind of international regulatory framework, but I would like to know whether you as workers have inputted or developed any ethical standards that you referred to, that we need workers' rights frameworks that we can work together and help, or to build with, because these frameworks must come from the workers themselves. And, is there any discussion around that workers across the world can join in, and as scientists, we can support you?
Joan, I think you can go with that.
Okay, so the first question was about biases, and I'm going to respond by saying this. So when I spoke about the types of projects that you are being told to do, it's basically everything that you can see. So there's a project I personally worked in, and what we were required to do is to label beautiful. And according to the instructions, no bad intention in the comments I'm going to put here, but according to the instructions, a beautiful woman is a blonde woman with blue eyes and a very pointy nose and there's a whole description around what beautiful is, and that is what you're supposed to do, irregardless of this is what you see as beautiful. But then another person has already described what is beautiful, and that is what you're going to see on the internet most of the time. So when you look at maybe the most beautiful woman in the world, this is what you've trained the system as. So there's no way. Okay, there might be photos of other people just to make sure like it looks like it's not biased, but there's a lot of biasness and a lot of information control and conforming of our African culture. There's something that I've not mentioned that I also like, we also worked in. So you see, when you're working on these projects, and we as Africans, we dance with our costumes, and most of our costumes are maybe at times we don't have tops, or if we have tops, like it's very scanty. That is considered as nude. But on the other side, somebody walking with a bikini, a very stripped bikini, that's okay. That's considered as that's swimwear. So I just want to show you the context of how we are being placed and how they are placing themselves in these AI conversations and how they are controlling the narratives. And I hope that answers the question around biases. So very good question around a framework, if we have developed any framework. Yes, we have. We have a code of conduct, we have a policy brief, and we have a sample contract. I am going to start with a sample contract. In this field, we have contracts at times, or at times you check a box to say that you're going to follow the rules and regulation, and it speaks nothing about labor rights or what you're protected against. Other instances, you're having a project that says you're going to work for 2 weeks. Other instances, you're going to have a 200 pager and you're given 5 minutes to read it and go through everything. So the importance of us coming up with, as the Data Leaders Association, coming up with a contract is to inform that we need something that we really understand, we can go through, and it speaks to our protection, and also protects the organizations themselves. So that is why we came up with a contract. And you can, like, organizations who are interested can also adopt it as it is, or like can sort of like replicate whatever it is that we came up with as a sample contract. The code of conduct, yes, we came up with it, but then it was more national approach. After having conversations, and by the way, this is what is taking us to South Africa. After having conversations with different people, we were told that we should not treat Kenya as just a country, rather than phrase it as a hub, because there are also so many people coming in Kenya just for the work. So we are coming to South Africa to further the document, to make it have a more regional approach through a conference that we are going to attend on the 1st of July. So I feel like after we are done with the editing, and also we are in partnerships with now we started having conversations with various universities around having research papers, and just having conversations around what this landscape is all about. So at the moment, we have a research paper that we are working on that is speaking about the reskilling and the upskilling. So in this type of field, despite maybe you or another person or even myself having professionally trained in other field, when I start in this work, it's just basic annotations, and it's a conversation you cannot have with another employer by saying I was drawing boxes or I was prompting LLMs. So that experience does not like, people will not understand what you're saying. And I have worked in this space for 8 years, so that means now if I want to go back again to the job market, I need to start reskilling. And you do not have money for paying universities and stuff like that, or like even training institutions. So you have to go back again to the training, to maybe just looking for another shitty opportunity. I'm sorry for using that word, but another shitty organization that's going to not just exploit you again. So we have a research paper that you're working on around the reskilling and the upskilling part of the conversations. We have another research paper that is almost coming up again around the payment and how you can, as workers, we cannot even access loans. We cannot, we do not have anything. You cannot even prove you're working, because even the payment today you're getting paid, next week you'll not get paid. And then the systems are very closed. So you even don't know, despite working for a very, you really work for a very long time, you're not even guaranteed of pay. So we are also having, we have like that research paper that you're also working for. So there's a lot of projects that we are working on about informing the mass and creating awareness around most of these challenges that we are facing. But then again, I want to remind you people that we are only 1 year and a few months in. So there's a lot of work, but I am really appreciative of the fact that you chose to have me in this conversation. So this means that you want to have the right conversations. You want to make things right. We are just not going to continue keeping quiet. You are going to be asking questions. And I really like having these conversations, because I feel like we are furthering the conversations, and we are also continuing the work we really started, creating awareness around the workforce that is working on the AI field is really sentimental part of the Data Laborers Association. Yeah.
Joan, I think there's one comment by Natalia, and then I want to come back to you for the comment from our youngest participant today, not me, someone else online.
Thank you, Joan. It's a very quick follow-up question. Do you have any research or any idea of the size? How many data workers are in Kenya, sort of in total? I know it's a sort of very precarious employment, so it's hard to count. Or in Africa, and just sort of the size of the problem and the workforce or potential workforce. Thank you.
Yeah. So I mentioned that I was a trainer, and when we were training, we were being given data from all over Africa. So yeah. So a colleague of mine and myself, we sat down, and I happened to be a trainer for 3 months, and he happened to be a trainer for 6 months. Collectively, we saw that we had trained 30,000 people, just 2 people in a span of 6 months, 30,000 people. When the organizations on LinkedIn, they are not putting the proper numbers of the people who work in their systems. So when you start, for example, in a business processing outsourcing or a BPO, when I go and start working there, I'm given a number. It's like you're working in school. And when I was working in the BPO called Summer, I was a number 1,000 and something. But in real sense, they're saying in LinkedIn that they have employed 5,000 people and below. So even the numbers that we have, it's just an estimate of how many people are really working. We do not have numbers that, a conclusive number that you can say it's, but I can promise you it's a very, very, very big field. And we wanted to have a mapping of workers as our first project, but then we did not get any funding for that. So we just left that at that. So usually I give that narrative of between me and a colleague of mine, we trained 30,000 people. So you can imagine, and we were a total of 150 trainers. Yeah.
Um, there's a question online. Abdullah, you want to read it?
Hi, good morning, Hassan. Can I go?
know Martha. And so you may meet her when you get here on the 1st. Let me go to the youngest member, Anga, writing to us from the Western Cape. She just turned 21, finished her first degree. She wrote, preparing for the meeting last night, I read the articles. I'm more cautious and aware the surveillance in Gaza through AI system is terrifying. The world feels like a dystopian simulation. After reading, okay. Sir, I wanted to ask, since in the article you propose that AI should be community owned and decentralized, what would it look like? How do you propose it could be done? I 100% agree that it should be taken in people's hands, but you wanted to know how this should be done. Have you guys been thinking about that? We will be discussing it, but I was quite pleased that in the homework of Anga, this is the one point that she touches on, because it does touch on autonomy. You know, from the young persons to us, the older ones, we're worried about that. You know. Have you got any ideas on that? And before we release you as our guest speaker to let this marauding hordes in here take over the floor?
The moment, the very basics and the very foundations of AI, the AI that we are speaking of now is really not ethical at all. When you look at the extraction that you're really speaking about, when you look at the exploitation that you're really speaking about, I think that's the thing we need to change. So, for example, before all this AI is deployed and before workers are even exposed to, do the people who are part of the data that we receive to annotate, do they know that their information is being used to train self-driving cars? Do they know that their personal information, maybe using a Roomba? I don't know if we have the Roomba in South Africa, but it's here in Kenya very rarely. Do you know that that Roomba is collecting your personal information? Do you know that the Meta Ray-Ban glasses are collecting your personal information? Do you have you consented to it? So if you have consented to it, for how long or for what purposes is this data that you've consented to? What is coming out of this? How are you benefiting from your data doing all these things? So let's start with being transparent about, if I think this is what is going to make the big tech accountable. First of all, let's ask them where they are getting this data from, because it's data we are using to train these systems. I think when we start asking hard questions is when accountability and transparency is going to take place. But then when we keep quiet and then now start looking at outcomes and what workers are exposed to do, I think we are going to be a bit too late in the conversation. Let's have the big tech communicate first how they have acquired this data, where they acquired it from. Do these people know that this data is being used to train these things? Because I am very sure, even for the self-driving cars, nobody knows if their cars were being taken photos of. Last year, I happened to go to Germany, and the scenes were very familiar to me. I felt like I was walking literally in a task, because I was very familiar with especially roads that had graffiti and all those things, because these are tasks that I've already done. And I asked my host, so have you seen cars with mounted cameras on top? And she said yes. But then, and I asked her, were you communicated what these cars are doing? And she said geotagging. But then when it comes to here in Kenya, what they're being told is geotagging. We are using as training data for self-driving cars. So I think having this conversation and asking very difficult questions is going to help us maybe create accountability and also transparency in the supply chain. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Comrade John. I was reminded earlier that when I made my magnum opus speech, no one heard it outside this room. So I just wanted to suggest that this group, as you know, John, is a voluntary group that organizes itself, and people come from different interest groups, some of them very concerned about minerals extractions because we work in mining affected communities. So we're concerned that copper, silicon, gold, rare earth elements, cobalt, lithium, gallium, and others that we have studied elsewhere are used very much, have to be extracted. People have to be relocated, removed from their homes to get these minerals to make this AI possible. There are some of us who are interested in the refining and processing of it. A lot of us are interested in data center hubs because of what it does to us. South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, Rwanda are some of the countries that are there. The semiconductor manufacturing hubs in Africa, we don't know too much about it, but I know it was historically dominated by East Asia. Some of us are interested, like as I am, in what happens to the waste, the mine waste, the e-waste that comes about, and these all along the development of this process is waste. So we're going to be discussing it, and some of us, like Taurik mentioned, are concerned how these corporations come and displace people, take their land, take their water supplies, steal our knowledge, and define someone like you not as beautiful, but you're very beautiful. And thank you for coming today. Yes. Comrades, can I suggest maybe a 5-minute body break, and then we come over here because Tariq and others want to talk about Amazon, AWS, and that. And Joan, I was asking you, are you going to be hanging around for the day? Because we're going to have another 30 minutes of this kind of discussion on the social, and then we're going to go into the policy, and then we're going to look for the way forward, how we take it through networks, and how we take this, because even this process, we're not going to write, we're going to write some additional stuff when they come out. But governments can't tell us how we should tell them what we want. We can say it in whatever language, we can give them audio, we can give them hieroglyphics, they must interpret what we are saying. So this podcast will send to the portfolio committee even before they have a document, so they know that we are thinking. Hopefully it can shape their hallucinations better. Anyhow, so 5-minute break, Shamir? 5-minute break, this is a private chat. Okay. Good. Good morning, comrades. Good morning, comrades. We starting what is not exactly the second session, but after a break, after Joan's input, we thought we needed a break. And Joan's, I can see why she suffers post-traumatic stress disorders, as if she's been in a war. But that's what capitalism does to people. We are in a war with capitalism. We are in a war. But I've got a number of speakers here who would like to pick up the conversation around how this AI is uprooting people. And I wanted just to get some sense of how many. Taurik wanted to speak and he's not here. I wanted just to have a sense of controlling all that. Shamima, I want you to kick off. Deepika, you wanted to raise the issue about AI and democracy in India, so that could be another. Shamima wanted to kick off engaging around Musk and his threats, and then okay, yeah, but it relates to your black economic empowerment, the environmental concerns we have regarding Elon Musk thing. You wanted to, yeah, but it's going to, and that when people speak, they can give introduction. Just do it that way, because there are people on the line that also would want to do the same. We could take another hour. Shama, just 1 second. So those who are going to speak are going to introduce themselves, and we take it from there. Dula?
The job of describe not what they're saying and what they're saying, but specifically action points which come out of what they say.
Yeah.
Picking up from what they say, what are the action points that involve that intervention?
Yeah.
And we speak about it so that after all what they spoke, then we can say, okay, these are the action points.
Yeah.
These are the policies.
I don't want to be presumptuous, but I saw Natalia writing a lot in Kosi. So, but okay, cool. No, but a couple of people are there. So, do you want to kick off, Natalia, or do you, or you? Do you want to kick off? Just introduce yourself as we say. So
Relates, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Eleanor Sisulu. I'm the chairperson of the Puku Children's Literature Foundation, and I've also been involved in solidarity campaigns, and I've seen a link between all the solidarity, whether it be for Palestine, Cuba, the conflicts that are going on around the world, with the rise of fascism in America, the role of US tech in all this, and our national policies, the whole attack on sovereignty worldwide, racism, neo-Nazism. So one of the campaigns which I have been pushing is for us to disassociate with Elon Musk, because I think while we look at big tech in general, there are specific actions that we can do, more low-hanging fruits that we can carry out, and especially boycott. I believe boycott is a big weapon that we have. So I've been looking at boycott, and we have a Stop Starlink WhatsApp group, and people can join. But so that is like one of the aspects of this bigger struggle that we have. So how do we influence our governments to make the right moves as far as dealing with this? We've looked at I've been looking at how the Europeans are actually actively working towards their own digital sovereignty. And for example, Denmark has made a law that every citizen has a right over their own image. So AI, you can't just mess with Danish citizens and do what you want with their images. And so there are a lot of low-hanging fruits that we can grab. And I think identifying one person and action against that, effective action, helps influence what is happening in the whole sector. So the Stop Starlink, I will circulate the dissociation from Elon Musk paper so that people can look at it. And then I think also we have had some success through background lobbying with ICASA, where they've taken a position at last. And I must say our state is divided. Even within the ANC, people are divided. There are those who say, let these people come in. If they want to invest, if they want to support our communities, great. We want the money regardless. And there are others that are saying no. And so we also need to understand and know where and how to lobby. But I think this is all, the Stop Starlink is just part of this whole AI war machine, and is part of our political struggles against global fascism.
I want to keep on the themes, right? I want to keep on the same thread. So if we're going to go through this, I want to come to Shamima. But before that, let me just say that, Eleanor, we come a long way, but we need to know that there are white guys, white South Africans, who love this idea that they think Musk will give it to us cheaper. So it's not just government. It's also the citizenry that have been bought onto this idea that Musk is going to bring this efficient bullshit, without worrying about the bigger things that we're worried about. So there must be some campaigning at a popular level to try and convince this other part of the citizenry, middle class, largely white, who actually are uncritical of it. Shamima, you had an issue. Yeah. Then I want Shamima to come in afterwards.
Yeah, you'll see on the association with Elon Musk, it's not just about Starlink. It's about Grok AI and child abuse sexual material. And I think Joan spoke to that. I think that's really important because there's certain constituencies that will respond to that. They won't respond to the other political things, but they'll respond to that. But you'll also see in the paper the issue of state capture, that if we're concerned about state capture, we're concerned about our own politicians, Pala, we're concerned, Malema being sentenced to 5 years. What they have done is nothing compared to the state capture and level of criminality in of the Trump Epstein regime. So these are things that come out in that paper. So I won't say too much because it's encapsulated in there, and I'll circulate it.
Hi, Chimima again. I just want to take a step back. And we initially started as concerned about data centers and the inadvertent outcomes of data centers. And then a month ago, we discovered that the state has released an AI draft policy. And that's how today's workshop started, and we thought we'll give input into it. And what Joan has made us is, what I've put down is that we need to talk, because the data center is a subsection of the life cycle of AI. She calls it the supplier chain, but for us it's the life cycle. And as we move into more and more, the gig economy gets it entrenched, elements, you don't have workers' rights as the supply chain or the life cycle is outsourced. Right? And so we've got to look at the entire life cycle of AI. So from the time it's commissioned to the data extraction, to the modeling, the kinds of models that they use, the reference to where they're storing the data and doing the crunching the AI factories, right up to what Hassan is concerned about is, so now where is this waste going to? And when you decommission it, what then happens with the infrastructure? So that's the thing I want to embed, that while we are a data center and surveillance, it is an element of the entire life cycle of the AI. And the other area that I want us to seriously think about is the governance of AI. And thirdly is our minister in the draft AI policy was gladly willing to sell our public data. You know, that means that Bera's records around confounding diseases would be sold off to a company that's doing something on clinical work. And that is, it's in our AI draft policy that gladly they'll sell it, you know. So we need to come up today, and I'm hoping, is that if we can focus on AI governance and the life cycle, and particularly the data centers and why we're not going to subsidize them. Then thirdly, I just read 102 pages of the new draft regulations by Treasury on preferential procurement. It's called the General Regulations on Procurement. So it's all very good because it wants to stem out corruption. It wants to make a procurement more open. So we all support that, the transparency, efficiency, because we want more bucks for our public money. But it's 15% of our GDP that public procurement represents at 1.75 trillion rand, right? So there's a lot of the regulations are viva. We support those regulations, but there's two in particular that is worrying. The one is that suppliers with bilateral agreements do not need to fulfill our preferential procurement. Now, a lot of people are worried that or critical of Black economic empowerment as when they think of preferential procurement, they think of triple BEE. But preferential procurement is not triple BEE. As the Constitution says, Section 217, preferential procurement is about controlling our industrial policy. So if we have a sector or something that we want to protect or enhance, we can use our public leverage, our public procurement leverage to move in that particular direction. Now the regulation says we must make job creation as a requirement in public bidding. But when it comes to environmental sustainability, public organs of state need not make environmental requirements a must. Can you see they're not obligated? Not only, but even for local. So for bilateral, they can bypass all forms of procurement, preferential procurement requirements. So even if it's job creation, they can bypass it. But for local guys, the one I'm writing about is that it doesn't make it an obligation on organs of state to include in their bid documents that you got to protect the environment. It's a may. You know, in the legislation, it's must, it's binding, and may is it's not binding. And so data centers, if the state, let's say CETA wants to procure and invest in a data center, they don't have to fulfill environmental requirements. So that's the thing that, if you can look at it, it's section 2020 of the Public Procurement Act. Yeah. So I've said a lot of stuff. Sorry, guys.
No, Shamba, you raised the points and it's been recorded, and people are writing it down. I mean, I think the one issue that you are saying potentially is a constitutional crisis, because the law says one thing and they are saying it can be bypassed, may be bypassed, because the law says.
No, the law says that you can allow preference. So the Constitution is very good. It says, Section 217 says, you can, public procurement must be fair, just, transparent, all of that. But then it has a condition. But you can also include preferential procurement. It can only be done under national legislation. Right? So now we have a new act called the Public Procurement Act in 2024. But the minister has only produced the regulation that gives effect to it this month, no, last month.
But there's a space to comment.
There's a space to comment, and we've got to use that space to defend environmental and to get rid of the bilateral agreements.
So the only point I was making, potentially, the bilateral agreements cannot undermine the constitutional imperative. But you, Natalia, introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Natalia Dinette.
Before that, can we just say, so we're talking the action that comes out of that intervention. So we discuss we'll discuss then what is the action, and so it's almost like a work stream that we've identified. Okay.
Well, I'll come to that. So I'm Natalia Dinette. I am part of an organization. I'm on the organizing committee of the International Union of Scientists Against Militarism. It's an anti-imperialist, anti-racist international group of scientists. We've got over 1,000 somewhat subscribers across the world of scientists, and our active members are from mainly the global south. And we believe that science is ideological, science is never neutral. And from there, we need a scientist to take a stand against war, imperialism, racism, etc. So we have been talking about AI, and on our website, we've got interviews with people about how AI has been used in militarism. Especially, we've got an interview with Anthony Lowenstein about Gaza and the Palestine Laboratory. And we've got interviews with people like Jane Duncan, who's looked at AI and the use in security studies. And we've got Mac Mahmoudi from Amnesty. We have an interview with him looking at how Gaza and the West Bank have been used, again, to train, in AI. On my side, we are involved in a health project looking at, so this is how it looks at crucial minerals and the impact that mining, especially uranium, has from the mining center. So we're looking at women and communities and their reproductive health in Snake Park in Soweto, to where it impacts on women in Fallujah and Gaza. So we're looking at the whole chain of supply and how uranium has gone. So we have partnered with researchers from Purdue University and researchers from here. And we're starting with a small pilot. So we'll be measuring mercury, lead levels in people's bones in Snake Park, and looking at hair samples. And what we're trying to show is how it impacts the mining with the sort of very dishonest and irresponsible non-rehabilitation of the mines afterwards. And then looking, and they've been doing a lot of work in Fallujah and Gaza to see how women then are impacted at the end of these weaponry. Back to the International Union of Scientists, we are looking at AI in militarism, in education, its impact on democracy, and so how AI has swung elections and votes, and then the water and environmental impact of it. So one of the difficulties and one of our challenges is linking the scientist worker, because as scientists we're workers, right? And we are exploited. And in a way it's difficult because we are working in very isolated scenarios and we're dependent on grants, from these big tech companies. But linking the scientist workers with the data workers and tech workers, and looking at how that looks like, both at a local and international scenario. So the Boycott and Stop Starlink is a very important project for us, to have these things come down to local levels. I thought it was really important what Joan said, and that is around the need for research. And I think that this group can look at aspects of that, the need for research and information to make visible, for example, these evil companies, What's their link with Israel? What are they doing? She said they don't even know which company they're working for. So I think that we could play a role in that research and looking at what Shamima said, like we could make information sheets that can be useful to everybody, because not everybody knows a lot about this new, Digitech and how fast it's moving. So breaking down what you were saying about the governance aspect into a 2-page or 1-page information sheet, breaking down which companies are involved, and exposing them and exposing the workers, and how Amazon workers are involved. I think that that's something that we should be doing to inform people so that we could then, take the campaigns further. So I think we're well placed to do that. So that's basically, and as the IUS, we were planning a meeting of Global South civil society on AI, and next year, May. And we would really look at bringing together civil society and scientists, which hasn't been done before. People have been working separately. Civil society, scientists, and activists in South Africa next year, May. And so we're hoping that it feeds into this process and that we work together.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, could I wanted to point out that we're going to look a little bit at the institutional arrangements that were envisaged. But I think that the democracy stuff, Deepika raised an issue in relation to India. I'd like her to speak. Then Tariq, we're going to come to you regarding what Google and them have been doing to our natural resources, our intellectual resources, etc. So if I think that when I'm next to you, then it's a controlling factor.
Oh, I'm not going to talk much.
No.
I actually, sorry, I think with democracy, yeah, with India, I think, so there's how they're like controlling voter rolls and all that. So recently, like I think earlier this month, sorry, I'm Deepika Nath. So just earlier this month, BJP, the right-wing Hindu nationalist, Islamophobic, anti-poor, anti-Dalit party in India, won West Bengal for the first time in like half a century. And West Bengal's chief minister is kind of centrist, but she's been pro-Dalit, pro-Muslim, etc. And the propaganda that was used all over social media by BJP was that we need to get rid of this party because they're pro-Muslim. So India is also riding on the back of the global Islamophobic wave to stir up sentiment. So I think there are 2 points here. One is how they're fiddling with voter rolls and so on. Apparently, 9 million people were struck off the voter rolls in West Bengal, which still doesn't explain the 90% odd win that BJP got, given that West Bengal has a population of about 40% Muslims. Don't quote me on the figures, but it's something like this. So I think it'll be really interesting to figure out how they're manipulating people. If they're getting Muslim members in West Bengal to vote for the BJP, then we've got a whole other set of problems there as well. But the other issue is, India has the largest number of WhatsApp users, and WhatsApp is just its own thing. And during COVID, for example, there were these videos that were circulating, and speaking of scientists, Natalia, I had a friend who has a PhD in physics, teaches physics and maths. You'd think like super rational. During COVID, he's from India, and he's sharing with me a video of like a fruit vendor. And he's saying, this is how COVID's spreading, because look at this fruit vendor. He's touching each fruit on his cart as he sells, right? So we've got I think social media is doing something to our minds as well and making us, irrational, to use that language. So my last point here, Hassan, really is, I also am really concerned about the human aspect. And I think with AI, they want us to talk about tech. They want us to talk about, not they don't want us, but, we can talk about resources and all that. But I also worry about how it changes our subjectivity, the ways in which neoliberalism set out to make us selfish and greedy and all of those things. And I feel like the AI project is more of that. And young people, the more cynical young people are, the more disempowered they feel, the easier it will be for AI to win. So I have a concern around that sort of human subjectivity thing as well, which I think they're very concerned about. I think they really care what we think, which is why there's so much propaganda in ensuring we don't think against them. Thanks.
So I think what you're touching on is also this whole issue that some people have been calling algorithmic justice, the algorithms, etc. Because we worried a lot about infrastructure, regulation. We don't check enough at the things that other people are worried about. Hey, I'm manipulated to buy this, etc., etc. Tariq. Yeah.
Actually, follow the principle are deliberately giving information into certain needs. That it's not sort of like a thing that's just a business. It's actually big money. Bringing funds. The Boris Johnson friends $1 billion.
Yeah.
They're investing.
Yeah.
And that's happening in Kenya. It's happening in South Africa. It's happening in Europe, America, Argentina, where the votes are being swung by the likes of Cambridge Analytica, the Washington.
Cool. I know that Trump's son even betted on Maduro being extracted, and then they made money out of it, and then Trump condones the casino economy. Tariq, over to you. You're going to raise a few things.
Yes. Okay, so
you can control the means of production.
Thank you. I'll control the means of production. My name is Tory Jenkins. I'm the convener of the Save Our Sacred Lands campaign. I'm also a leader and representative of the Gurinaikona Traditional Council that for the last 10 years has been in an ongoing fight against the world's largest company on earth, which is Amazon, on a precinct which was historically colonized by the then first world's largest company, the Dutch East India Company. I'm talking about an area called the Two Rivers Urban Park, which is considered an epicenter of liberation and resistance in the history of our country. It is here where Roman Dutch law was weaponized for the first time to justify indigenous land theft on the banks of the Liesbeek River and the Black River, where the employees of the Dutch East India Company were gifted parcels of land in what is basically the first colonial settler project for commercial agricultural farming purposes on indigenous terrain. It is a place that also earmarks the first battle fought by the Khoi and San against the Portuguese on the 1st of March 1510, a successful battle that basically stopped us from being under the yoke of Portuguese slave colonization. It is on these embankments that prompted the first Khoi-Dutch War, where the Liesbeek River itself became the frontier war. And over a period of about 180 years, a series of Khoi and San wars of liberation and resistance precipitated in a domino effect as what would call the colonial bomb exploded on this particular precinct. I think it's very important to give this particular historical framing in terms of what is happening on the banks of the Liesbeek River, where Jeff Bezos has placed his African headquarters, in our view, completely illegally on what is now the Riverlands precinct, which is a 15.2 hectare piece of land. It is built on a floodplain at the confluence of the two sacred rivers, and it is within the precinct that the Department of Arts and Culture had forwarded a slate to UNESCO for a World Heritage recognition. It is currently undergoing a nomination for national heritage status with the South African Heritage Resources Agency. Our campaign basically has seen how the local authorities, the City of Cape Town, the Western Cape government, have greenlit a development that violates the National Environmental Management Act and completely violates the South African Heritage Resources Act. The Liesbeek River, for the purposes of this development, has been reframed into a stormwater ditch, which is a huge concern for indigenous communities, where this kind of epistemic violence of reframing a natural water system in something that is inanimate in order to allow for the development to encroach in the way that it's encroaching. Now, I want to point out one certain aspect, and just to corroborate with what the comrades have been saying around how, for example, this procurement act that we're seeing is as a result of this development being the testing ground. They tested all the legislation and they got away with it, to the point that it has become a Trojan horse within the broader TRUP area, which is the 200 hectare area, where there's a threat on Oldemolin, for example, an eco-village of another multi-billion rand development threat, where tonight, for example, is a deadline for an appeal, where once again the Western Cape government is using taxpayers' money to appeal the contestation against another egregious, completely inappropriate large-scale development on a highly sensitive area, and also an area that speaks to the ongoing de-Africanizing project that is so endemic within the Western Cape, especially in terms of the San and Khoi. It's important to point out when you talk about Amazon Web Services, Comrade Hassan, this is not a foreign entity to the extent that we believe it is. The authors of cloud development were white South Africans who were contracted by Jeff Bezos about almost 2 decades ago to develop cloud developing services. Amazon Web Services was started in Cape Town. There was a headquarters in Rondebosch and then in Camps Bay, and it was so successful that then it now forms the most profitable wing of Amazon. Amazon Web Services has contracts with the industrial military complex as we understand it. It's got live contracts with the US State Department, with its military, with MI5, with MI6, and basically these are multi-billion-dollar contracts, and of course it's got a highly controversial one with Israel, together with Google, called Project Nimbus. Now, if you look at that contractual arrangement, there's a clause there which states that even if there would be protest and advocacy against the usage of AI, Amazon and Google are forbidden to cancel their contract, which means that already the Zionist entity understood that the nature of these contractual arrangements were militarized by nature and that they were inevitably going to entail violations of international humanitarian law, the Constitution, and just generally speaking. Why I'm saying this is because on the one hand, yes, you've got Elon Musk, who has also interfered with our international foreign policy to the point where the very definition of refugee has been completely compromised. Where because of this insistence of a white genocide with Afrikaners, this is inordinately connected to the scourge of AI and the extent to which it is not just a colonial project, it is a tornado of colonialism, to the point where South Africa, because of our case at the ICJ, is now basically being claimed as a genocidal state. Now, when you connect that to what Jeff Bezos, for example, and what they have been doing, in the sense that the etchings of the genocide of the San and Khoi starts at the banks of the Leesbeek River, and we have communities here that are still have not been formally recognized in terms of the historical genocide and the ongoing epistemic cultural erasure in terms of the descendant and tributary descendants of the San and Khoi who are sitting in the concrete jungles of the Cape Flats. And I say concrete jungles of the Cape Flats because when you talk about the environmental degradation of the Renosterveld and the extent to which the environment, as we understand it, has been devastated, is prompted by the colonial settler project that happened in 1657 and how that spread across from the banks of the Leesbeek. I say this because this is then a central, pivotal case that speaks about the multidimensionality of data extraction, environmental devastation, heritage fracturing, and in this case also the divide and conquer mechanisms of how traditional groups have been played against each other. Combined with the fact that you have activists that have been threatened, that have been subjected to smear campaigns, to vexatious litigation and slap suits and so forth. And right now, this development is being challenged by a rescission application at the High Court. And that is against two governments, the Leasepik Leisure Property Trust, of which all the directors are part of Zenprop, which is one of the largest companies in South Africa that deals with your major malls and shopping complexes, all that kind of thing. So I think it's important to understand that the relationship that the Western Cape government has with Amazon Web Services culminates in a 32 billion rand development deal that they have over the next 10 years. And the fact that Amazon had a non-disclosure agreement with Leasepik Leisure Property Trust, that we as activists only understood it was Amazon behind that development the day when the Municipal Planning Tribunal had agreed to the rezoning of what would be a public open space into multi-purpose. That means that a piece of land exponentially has its price increased in terms of value because of rezoning. So just quickly on this thing, one of the things that our campaign is very concerned about is the extent to which there is current departmental capture. Checkpoint, which is an Israeli-based company, runs the back end of the South African Treasury, of the South African Police Force, of the Presidency, and the Department of Agriculture, etc. And the fact that these contractual arrangements are now being renewed, and the way that they're being renewed is that often Checkpoint will have a third party in order to almost like invisibilize itself, but it's the same entity that is being contracted. And so we're looking at billions of rand and hundreds of millions of rand that are perpetually going into the renewal of these contracts that are based in Israel. And I think it is important to link what are the precepts of now the recommendations by the UN, by the ICJ, in terms of the nation state's responsibility, in terms of its ethical responsibility of who are going to be contracted, which companies are going to be contracted in terms of the back ends of all our government institutions, because it actually has a direct effect on all of us as citizens and so on. And then lastly, I just want to quickly point out that this whole campaign as well has really taught us about the narrative and how the narrative is being contested. When Reuters, New York Times, BBC, Al Jazeera, who always call us and ask for comment, when they call the City of Cape Town, the Western Cape government, Leasepik Leisure Property Trust, and Amazon itself, they are all deferred to Tony Leon's PR company, Resolve, which has had and it's in the court papers, was paid in 2021, 2022, 3 million rand to deal with the PR. Now, when you connect that to the broader apparatus of narration and narrative, and even in terms of how these kinds of contested narratives around genocide being a big word, around how the City of Cape Town's mayor says that apartheid spatial planning is a propaganda term and that they're going to use taxpayers' money to build an N2 wall of about 120 million rand as a solution to basically invisibilize systemic structural violence that is occurring along the N2 in the way that we're literally going to see a Gaza war. These things are so deeply interconnected. And so when we talk about the challenging of that procurement policy, and the fact that for some reason, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are allowed to do what they're doing in violation of the National Environmental Management Act, the National Heritage Resources Act, and also in this way to completely cripple what should be a World Heritage Site that is committed to healing in this country. Because when you talk about land, when you talk about dispossession, when we talk about a decolonial framework, the most important thing is to come to a place of return that is embodied, where you can say this is where the original sin has happened. And I'm just saying that instead you've got this almost Cecil John Rhodes type memorialization of a new imposed imperial symbol that is situated on the banks of the Leasepik, and just how pervasive that alone and has been left alone is a real threat to our sovereignty, but it's also a threat to our identity as Africans. And finally, just to comment lastly on India. India recently, last 2 years, made an incredible court judgment where, because of the culture of impunity by developers, they issued a demolition order for skyscrapers, which then puts us in a situation where, in our court case, when we are asking, well, what do you want? We are saying, well, we want that entire structure, and a lot of it is up at the moment, but we want it demolished. It's simply because everything was done without consent. And the issue of consent, which was brought up here, is absolutely pivotal. And when consent is being violated in the name of AI, and when you have such devastating, in-your-face violations on all these categories, the issue of consent becomes really important. And it means that what we need to ask for in return has to be the maximum form of restitution, of reparations, based on the violence that has already occurred and the kind of capture that we are already situated in. So I think, as Comrade Hassan said, we may have come late, but I think it's also important for us to understand the extent to which the incursions have already happened. And as we talk about this paper, we also need to talk about what are the restitutive aspects around this. What about this paper is actually going to provide mechanisms of recourse? And the fact that when we look at the notion of extraction and the notion of mining, it is now a rehashing and a recycling. I think the comrade said, now what is the worst manifestation of it? Which is our private information. Thank you.
I'm reclaiming the means of production. Okay, thanks. Comrades, just this hold it. I think that I've got to manage some of the time as well. And Tariq usually has a lot to say, and it's important that he does say it. Sometimes I think what we need to do, Tariq, you just have to state which 3 things you think the collective can help push. Because what happens that South Africa is a unitary state, but sometimes when things happen far away, people here don't know, don't really care. It's not right. As social justice activists, we should. But we need to talk, because in our group, we did discuss even the drones. When I spoke to someone from Treasury to say, where did they buy the drones? And I could say that the guy was once upon a time a comrade. Huh? The line went dead, right? So in part, we're doing, let me be clear, we're trying to gather activists who are strong in their areas of work, trying to harness them for a collective cause that we can push to. So it means that we cannot fight everything that you guys do, Tariq, but we can fight 3 of them in a comprehensive thing around ownership, etc., where there's an intersection, as you pointed out, right? The issue about narratives, clearly, as you know, is strong, is an area that I'm engaging in a lot. It's not the first time that Leon rears his head in the Western Cape. It looks like they've been dying to give this guy contracts. Every time there's something, they give the water one, they put him there. I'm just trying to finish a piece now, just to say about narratives around fact checkers. Before the last election, 2024, the fact checkers found only 2 political parties were standing with the country we accuse of genocide. And all the others that were mentioned, like COPE, Patriotic Alliance, etc., were exonerated by this fact-checking mechanism. So I've spent the last few days just looking at an old article, because elections are coming up again. So the idea of the narrative is both old and new media, right? They publish and they have the professionals to say, this one's got a halal certificate, you can eat it, right? It's exactly that. So I'm hoping that in the next day or so, I'll finish this. But so we need to think broadly, what is it that we can bring? When I raise the issue about us coming late to the Prati, and Adipika raises the same issue as you, that may be a blessing. right? Where it can be a negative is that when people discover what others in other social movements have done and don't try to develop our local talent and energies from the working class and the poor, we simply take what the others have done. It's going to really undermine our movement. I've invited a couple of union people. I don't know if any of them are online. One was going to be here in person. But I think we need to keep going, getting that kind of collective going. Eleanor, you wanted to do a response, and then Natalia. I'll give you this. I'll give you that.
Tariq's intervention was absolutely important. And, there's been things I've been feeling and sensing, but not actually knowing. And he put the facts behind that. I've been very concerned about Amazon Web Services. As an NGO, I went to their presentation, I think about 5-6 years ago. We're offering us place on the cloud and this and that. And I didn't know much at the time, but I'm so glad my instincts told me that no, don't go there. But I just want to add your political analysis. One of the things is that the issue of secession of Western Cape is a real thing. It's, I used to think it's just talk. It's actually a real thing. So I think I just want to add that as part of the consideration. And also that in terms of the narrative and the advocacy, it's difficult for many people in the rest of the country to understand the depth of what Tariq is saying, but flagging that this is part of a secession plan. People then will listen. Yeah.
Yep, so I'll just be very brief. Yep, it's Natalia Dinette. So I'll just be very brief. And following on what Comrade Tariq is saying and Comrade Eleanor, I think, and I propose that when we're going forward, we actually name the broader process for what it is, and that is recolonization. And if we start from that perspective, it then gives us, a line of march. I found it very interesting. Lula from the Brazil and Prabhat Pratnik, who's a Marxist Indian economist, was talking about Iran. And they said in the context of Iran, if Iran falls, we will all be colonized again. And it got me thinking from the input of this meeting and from Joan's input that actually the AI is already that process happening again. And our lands are being violated and our people are being violated. So if we talk about this as recolonization, I think that's a very important first step. And then it frames our struggle as an anti-colonial, we can think of other words, and I'm thinking about with imperialism, etc. But I think that's important. So that's the one proposal. The second one is, again, emphasizing that we need information and research to build our, and some sort of repository of information. And for example, to know how many tech or data workers are implicated. And I think we've got the resources to do that, to inform. And the information that Tariq was coming, that all needs to come together. And the last one was just a quick question about the policy paper and concretely how we do it and what the date timelines are for the comments for the policy paper.
Just for the record, Deepika, I have noted you. We will discuss in the last session, and it's already, we don't have too much time left. Shamima has rightfully pointed out, Abdullah, can you check if there's anyone from online who've got anything to say? Okay. Kosi, I've got to just check that. What Abu one? Chetan? Raj? You've been active in the group, so you want to say anything? Abdullah? Okay. Comrades, I in my piece I did, which was even published on IOL, I raised a number of issues, which may be a good chance to go, when I mentioned that, to turn over to Deepika, then to Shamima to talk about it. I raised the issue about the right to say no. right, which is quite established in environmental and mining activism, to where these data centers will be built. Martha keeps telling me that in the town that her mother was born, the drinking water which this data center used has been chowed up. But the examples go to Texas, to various places like. So there's greater possibilities for global networks, but we have to come with what we bring to the party. So the kind of things that Tariq and the indigenous stories we talk about, challenging our law, we've got to do that, and mustn't be afraid, Shamima, as you pointed out, to use legal strategy, because I know Hank and others who are lawyers are online here, that we need to try and check those kind of things. But I must say on the Star Trek one, because I'm calling it Star Trek, that Starlink, I was very impressed. Yeah, exactly. I was very impressed because when I'm driving, I listen to radio and I jump around and try and call. I noted how the news item came up, mentioned ICASA. Of course, they don't mention who's doing the lobbying, which is good. And then immediately mentioned the portfolio committee endorsing the position. And I must say, following Dr. Tlaleng's case and stuff like that, there seem to be in Parliament, some of the portfolio committees have been catching a wake up. They've been really, I was listening to 6 hours, I was in Zim, 6 hours, and then for 3 hours they had the Health Professionals Council in the dock. So I really think we mustn't diss our current crop of politicians. We need to work harder with them, especially given that the elections may be stolen, right? By who? I don't even know. Some voluntarily. There's the other thing that you can't steal. Can't steal from a crook who's already bent on doing bad things, but there are good people across all these parties. So I wanted to say, so the one is right to say no. You heard from Joan, they militate against you organizing, right? So I've got these, Deepika, I'll send you, it's in my article. So it's not a big deal, I've got it down here. But the right of workers to organize, it must be illegal to stop workers from organizing. So I've got all this written down, it was published in the paper. The one part I didn't go to was the waste one that I will do as a separate article. But really, we've got it there and we've alerted Parliament that we are doing this proactively. Just the last point, one point, I'm not quoting them all, but it talks about algorithmic justice and equity. Systems must be designed to eliminate bias and inequality. There's a point that I got separate one on transparency and accountability. Deepika, you want to come in because then I want to move to Shama, who spent some time reading the document. I just want to talk about how they envisage wrongly the structures. It's always to build, to do this. And my approach and our approach should be, our principles must govern what administrative and regulatory structures must come in, not what they are trying to do. Because when they do that, they're going to get us stuck in with a whole lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So they'll determine the rules by which we engage, right? I just wanted to really quickly say a couple of things. One, on this right to say no, and you were saying workers organizing. I don't know if folks have been following the eviction thing, the new law that they want to pass, POE. They want to change the eviction laws. And I don't know if this is national or national, right? And one of the things, one of the problems with the POE, the new change they want to make is that people who show up in court because they're in fear of being evicted, etc., if they've been part of an organizing group, that will be held against them. So not only will they make it legal to evict you, even if you can show that you're going to be rendered homeless, etc., they want to change the law so that if you've been part of Abatlali, for example, that's going to count against you. Right? The judge can count that against you. So I think this right to organizing thing is actually wider. They're trying to do this everywhere, right? But the other thing I wanted to really quickly say was back to that question of ideology, which I think lots of how we're thinking. The fact that feminist science studies has been showing us for years that science is not neutral, whatever, right? But I feel like in terms of how they want us to think, there's a cult of newness around AI and tech, etc., where they're constantly oh, what's the next new thing? But listening to you and listening to all of us, I'm thinking that there's a very basic problem, which is that human rights are excluded from from the economic domain, right? Even getting economic and cultural rights to be recognized as human rights, it's a decades-long fight. Even then, there's no teeth to it. So cultural and economic, maybe we don't have to constantly be thinking of brand new things. There are older things on the books, such as economic and cultural rights. Maybe we need to try and give that more teeth, right? The things that are already on the book. So, yeah.
Sorry, just a very quick point, just to add on to Hassan's excellent point. And I would really sort of want to advocate that the legal strategy should never, as powerful as they are, I think in civil society they sometimes had been a double-edged sword because it's disempowered mass organizing, where you think, oh, TAC is going to win our rights, or this legal strategy and that legal strategy. And it really has disempowered. And so we walk with two legs, with the legal strategy, very important, but we use and we work with that, with mass organization and mass education. I was saying to Eleanor, I'm very worried about the role of Christian Zionism as an ideology creeping into South Africa. And we're not creeping, okay, correct. And so I think that it's always important that all of this, we should be rooted, in mass organizations.
How in this hallucinated
Policy.
because I am not article that said don't hallucinate overnight. Right? So I want to, because we have to talk about we got to talk about the principle. We need to stay more open.
The conversation was going to go where people are going to say, so it's like a brainstorm, and then we come to a bit of a cutoff point where you say, okay, we've heard what people are saying, what are we going to do about it, and how are we, and what do we need to do?
Yeah. My name is Simon Ramaphosa. I'm from Workers World Media Production. I'm a Labor Community Advice Media and Education Center coordinator here in Gauteng. Thank you.
Is there anybody working with the unions?
At this moment, the labor union are divided and bureaucratic. The service of workers, it's not good enough, but also we are divided by the politics of the stomach, and I would like to raise the issue of the national foreigners. We have seen a protest happening a few weeks ago around Gauteng and KZN. And this comes when we are approaching the local government election or national election. And one other thing that you have done, you have raised or highlighted, is that our people now are frustrated. There's unemployment, especially for the youth, inequality, and the government also is not doing enough, especially cost of living. It's too high, and people are just frustrated on the ground. And yes, the issue of Phala Phala and the issue of Julius Malema, yeah, they are, you know, we need that, people would need that education, especially people from Swaziland, the Palestinian people, you know. We had an event yesterday at Brandfontein around the issue of Swaziland, democracy. Yeah, you know, those people live here in South Africa with fear because they've run away from Swaziland because maybe they were going to be killed.
You know what?
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll move it around. Okay. My name is Nkosi Hlaveni, and I'm from a mining affected region in the far west rand here in Gauteng. So here. Okay.
We work together, and one of the things that we're trying to address is the divisions and deep hunger in our communities, chronic one. And so the idea that tackling AI has to be more comprehensive because the marginalization and that the unions are not just weak, you know, everything else has helped to make them weak as well. But I mean, we've been trying to get them to come in here. There's a bit that they can do a little bit more, but some of it is quite structural. The policies have been quite weak. Listen, we want to try and pick up, Tariq. You wanted to say with 2 or 3 things. Shamima, you want to kick off on your economic one first, and the law, the what was the document called? Procurement. Yeah.
Just so that we're a bit structured, we're at the point now where we are talking about action, what we're going to do the way forward. Because what I want to say is that we can't tackle everything. We have to find ways of breaking down. And in a sense, people represent different constituencies doing very specific things. So the main thing is to know, and what Shamima has said, this thing of responding and public participation, it's very difficult because people are often out of their depth. There's a level of expertise you need to engage in this, and which, you know, is not common. So we need to be able to say, in our networks and our networks of networks, we need to be able to say, there's Shamima there from, sorry, an organization again? Okay, Shamima is a researcher. She's been specifically looking at this, and she's the expert on this. And she has presented, and we trust her. And so, in a sense, she's representing all of us so that we don't have to engage in, well, not engage. We don't have to go to the level that she has. She's our expert, and she'll unpackage it for her. I think if we have that approach, then, you know, like, I'm not going to engage with Amazon in depth, but I know Tariq is there. What he is doing, everyone out there knows, my constituencies know. Then it informs us to say, okay, how does that translate into action? We boycott Amazon. How does it translate into action? What Shamima is doing? She presents it as a petition or a court action, we support it. So that we have a manageable action at the end of every work stream where people don't have to go into a huge thing which they don't have time for, but can actually take one specific action and actually do it. For example, with Amazon, say, okay, fine, I'm cutting my Amazon subscription. You know, that kind of thing. So what we need to go into now is how that knowledge and that work then translates into action. How we support you, but at the same time, how we get something out of it that we must specifically do ourselves.
Also an alternate and go back to our original reason for convening this, and that was to respond to an AI policy for South Africa. I thought that was yeah. And if we can focus on that, and the reason is, I just want us to imagine, because I was thinking the whole time last night, is that I'm not an AI user. I don't even program. So my knowledge of how AI is constructed and how we use it is very limited. But I know that it affects me. So I thought, how would we plan on how to respond to the AI policies two ways? One is to think about it as a general technology, a general purpose technology. So general purpose technology would be, a good example would be a wheel. So your car became a general purpose technology. It affected every aspect of our life. Money, paper money, affected every aspect of our life. It monetarized our economy, created a new way of transacting. So AI, because it's changing and we can't imagine what it's going to be, we know it's ubiquitous, right? And the second part is, once we imagine it as an all-purpose technology, then how do we govern it? And that's where we should be spending our time today, so we can submit to the state, to the Department of Communication and Digital Technology, right? Because that department is just doing rubbish. It's thinking of itself as the industrial policy thing. No, it shied away from writing regulations. And we need the regulations. Because currently, across the world, this is what I'm reading, is that the regulators are captured by big tech. And therefore, we need to put pressure on our state to begin to regulate. And that's what our AI policy should look like. It should not be about industrial policy, which the fake one was about. And then more importantly, if we think of it as a general purpose vehicle, then all these 8 institutions that the draft wanted falls flat. Because then fundamentally, we're talking of ethics. Then every organization has an ethics committee. And so AI is just one of the ethics things that they have to think about, whether it's sexual harassment, whether it's remuneration, because even in an NGO, you've got to talk about sexual harassment, remuneration, right? And now you have to just add AI to it and how you as an organization, and that's how we can make AI governance from the bottom, instead of all these institutions. So if we legislate it like that, that is my thinking for today. So I'm done.
I don't know, it's not different from what you are saying, because what you are saying about that procurement thing, I mean, we can talk about AI policy. Yeah, it's very important because it directly influences the issues of data centers and all that. The part of influencing AI policy itself, the direction and all, in a sense, that's quite, it's an easier part. But we can work to influence government on AI policy, but there are all these things that are part of actually what is actually happening. So there's the things that we can do which are not divorced from actually influencing the policy. So whatever campaign, so if you're doing a campaign around procurement, you relate it to what is happening in AI policy. If you're doing the campaign around Amazon and the website, we are relating it to, so it's all feeding into this AI policy. I think having Joan here is brilliant, because we know she's coming to South Africa. We can prepare for audiences at which she can speak, which are all, and I think it's the best thing that happened, that the AI policy was such a debacle. So it gives a window of opportunity, but all the activism we're doing needs to influence that. Yeah.
So I'll yeah, can I just add to that? So just to develop, I think the points forward is that there's a couple of things. This is a very, very fast moving area. And so, you know, we don't want to be caught on the back foot all the time. We're in it for the long run. our problems won't be solved by just an input into the AI policy, although that's the very important part of it. I'd like to know again, when is the date?
The policy, the position is.
But is it not being resubmitted?
Yeah, but the policy has been withdrawn and a committee of experts has been set up.
Right.
Yes, they've been set up, which includes Professor Bosman, who is a big AI person at BRICS. And I don't know him well, but from what I've heard, he's a good guy. There's Bukosi Marivati, who's doing the Professor Bukosi Marivati, who's doing the large language models at UP. And he is, he is.
Professor Marivati, it's interesting because I was contacted by one of the International Union of Scientists guys, works on large language models in Ethiopia. And there's a network about African large language models. They have accepted money from US military organizations. And when Marivati was approached about this, he said, because a whole sort of the website of this organization is all African Researcher for Africans. And when I looked at it, it really looked a bit CIA-ish. It's not being recorded. And you can take that bit. No, but it's a very, because when he was asked about it, he said, we'll take money from wherever. And he was quite happy. And when you look at the list of people supporting this project, the US military is there.
Yeah, so just to cut that short, we get to discussing that, but that's where the work needs to be done. There's these people, so we need to look at who this people are, and they need to be engaged with because they are the experts advising on policy. And there is possibility to impact on them. And so you need to know who all these people are. But the other important thing is that we have to get our universities engaged as institutions. So there is a window of opportunity where there can be a more in-depth discussion and there's space for activists to impact. So that's where we are now. There's no policy.
So my question then is, how and when do we engage with these universities? Because in part of the work that I've been doing, the universities are really not interested. They are getting funding from these big organizations. And I'm not saying we shouldn't engage with universities. What I'm saying is that we need to be strategic and we need to know exactly who we're dealing with and whose interests we're dealing with. And I'm also interested in timelines. So I agree with what Eleanor, and I support what Eleanor's saying, that we need to use, from this meeting, how do we go forward?
Yeah, I support it. Tarek had a lot of airtime earlier, so I'm punishing him a little bit. Could I just say that, listen, we must understand where we're at. We're all doing other things, right? And this grouping has now been in existence, Raj, for how long? DP guys were the first recruits, you and less than a year, no? Yeah, a WhatsApp group, right? Trying to galvanize people, so what we're trying to do, one part of it is to bring in progressive people who can work with us. So the unifying one was that we wanted to get in before, as the policy is withdrawn. So your point about engaging these professors and even the Mount piece of where we're going against militarism, surveillance economy, etc., is all there. We need to engage these guys publicly because what you're saying there is a deal breaker. If those that take money from the US and others are writing the policy, we are messing up. So with this idea of the writing up must be contested publicly, right? So they can open it up a lot more. But we're going to send this to the portfolio committee, our deliberations, and we can then distill it into a clearer point, as you're saying, for our movements, who's got expertise in what. So Eleanor, your point, we can do it in the grouping, because the grouping doesn't have everyone. For example, Natalia is not on the group. She came the other day, having received it from another comrade. She just, So what I'm saying to you, we're trying to do an active and passive accumulation of cadres, and then what we do on the basis of it, how we go on. Tariq and then Deepik.
Thank you, comrades. I think there's two things here which I feel are really important. There are two things which I think are really important. The mere fact that the policy, in a way, has been expunged doesn't, it opens up one, that we need to establish a framework. If we are saying that our framework is going to be anti-colonial and based on Black feminist thinking, that needs to be the framework from the onset. If we are seriously thinking that we are in the long haul. And this idea of having to kind of, rush to respond to something which is part of a public participatory process, where in fact we should be asking for accountability. One, we need to ask the minister to publicly publish who his advisors were, what their qualifications were, what was the level of consultation, to the point where you have an AI imaginative aspect that I think, if I read the report, was at least 22 different references were completely, yeah. And so right. So in other words, we need to ask questions in terms of who have been the think tanks, who have been deployed, why are those reports and that feedback not made public? Because it's just, I think it's tight to just expect us to kind of go, okay, the thing has been expunged, we're now going to respond. Respond on what? We're responding on something that is already systemically flawed. And I think by saying, and this is why I, in a way, and forgive me that I took so long with my presentation, but I think it's because the context is so important. And we miss the context. We can't be in the middle of a policy and then wanting to now educate us, want to now sort of reframe what we're doing without the context as languid and repetitive, and as it may be. I'm from Cape Town. I find it important that I'm here because this is really important, and this meeting is very, 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 very important. And so if we have established that we need a very robust, almost liberation and resistance framework in terms of how we are tackling that, then I think that's one aspect. And with that comes levels of accountability. It comes questions to the minister to say, how did we get here? That you have this thing, and what are the things that are needed? And so the establishment of this consultative expert forum, who decided on that, for example? And whether that thing can be expanded, and whether we can make sure that there are historians involved, that there are heritage practitioners, environmental specialists. You have feminists who are involved. We have people who are dealing with children's rights as a compulsory component. To say that because we are embracing AI in the context of acknowledging the damage that AI has actually caused to the African economy, the African sensibility, and the social fabric and historical, spiritual fabric of who we are as Africans. And so when it's based on that, I think we're not just sort of responding to this economic necessity on their terms, but in a way that would also deepen the empowerment of ICASA to protect our sovereignty, and that it's not just a question of we want to keep Elon Musk out. It's much bigger in that sense. Yeah.
I just want to come back, guys. Let's be very clear. Yeah, you can support it, but let me just get some factual stuff right. That the group started not because of an AI policy. First of all, the group started long before that. When the AI policy was put in, we said we should make inputs. We started long before that, right? So that's the first issue. And then when we said everyone who comes to this meeting must read the policy, as you can see, it was changed. But the argument I made in a few articles was that I don't think the policy will be fundamentally changed. It will be neoliberal. They'll take away the hallucination. Right. Yeah. So what I'm saying from their side, it will be the same thing. So what we said here, let's be very clear, Taurik. So when you're placing that we are here to do that, no. What should our policy be is today's brief. And we raised all the issues, the rights of communities, right to water, etc. So our line has been very, very clear. And what we are trying to do is, this is our first meeting. It has been a WhatsApp group meeting. Stephen Greenberg and various other people are not here, active on. So the point is, we are determining what it is. So when you're raising the other issues, who should be that? I hear it for the first time today, right? Who's on that one? But that's also fine. The question is, because we are self-organizing, we cannot also impose who's going to do what. So when you're saying should be challenged, I heard it for the first time. I would think that my tools where I'm engaging in on radio or phoning, right, etc., etc. But I think there must be some declaration that comes out from us, various organizations that say, we think that the way they want to go around this AI policy is wrong. So very simple point that they're going wrong. Because we can talk everything else, but we have to engage where the bourgeoisie and the bosses are currently at. They're thinking this policy will whitewash them and do what they want. So we should say they made mistakes. They use generative AI to do this. They will repeat the same mistake if they don't bring us in. So a simple declaration of what we should do as we get more organized. So it's ultimately just realizing who we are. To be honest with you, we can't say we should do this, then I phone Tariq. I'm not an organization, I'm doing other work, right? So you, Deepika, you wanted to talk.
Just really quickly, like as a practical step forward, would it be useful to have a central location, which I guess would be a website? We could do it on we could do like free website. Raj, I'm looking at Yeshin actually for this. I'm just saying, I'm just warning you. But like, okay, yeah. So we've got maybe like we can start with a central repository. Going back to the point, like, so that, for example, where we can have both all kinds of information. We can, you can have something about procurement. We can have it might be a good way to start. And going back to your question about we're starting late, I'm not aware of a central like website location that's taking this issue on. So in this sense, we might be, we could set and we could invite other people to join.
This morning. Sorry, there's as I was saying to you, yeah, there's not in South Africa.
No,
so, okay.
Made with the AI experts, there is, and it's been in existence for 10 years. I found it. I don't know, they're more technical people. Yeah. So we're talking about that social justice forum. We just all this happens.
So I'm hearing the term self-organizing for the first time. I'm used to to other types of organizing. What I'm proposing, well, no, I'm used to sort of democratic organizing. But what I'm proposing is that we make an alliance, because that's what I see here, is an alliance of organizations or a consortium, whatever you want to call it, of organizations around this campaign issue. This for me is a campaign, and it's a grouping or alliance of similar thinking organizations, and that we do then, as an alliance campaign, then say we would like, a say on this committee. I'm pointing at you, it's not your committee, on this committee, as one thing that we do, and that we, and as an alliance, then we have a website that takes commentary and develops, what our AI policy should look like.
Yeah. Shama, just 1 second, please. Yeah, could I just, again, I don't want to be in the correcting game. The group is self-organizing. That means we use our energy. So democratic self-organizing, that we do it. It's not, I put in the energy, we're paying for the food, we're getting people to come in. So people are doing that. But no funder is involved. And we like it. That's the point. Right. So this is the idea that we're talking about. If you like, using other traditions of the left that we are organizing, but knowing full well that people are doing other things. Right. That's the first issue. Abdullah manages a number of websites. He manages mine. He manages the CSOs for tailings justice. He manages PSA. He manages a number of websites. So it depends. So let's not rush into a decision because there are websites there that. So, for example, even the article I did, I think legitimately I put it on my own. I put it on CSOs for tailings justice. The question is, we need to have a little bit more discussions. Some people are coming in differently, not realizing the genesis of where this thing's at. Shama, just on your issue, what we're saying, the policy, AI policy, was not the reason we are here today. It was the excuse we used to come together. And when it changed, we changed the thing there. But we had always envisaged that we will come together when our time permits, because we're all doing something else. This is not our primary obligation. So that's the point, that we're all doing other things. And the fact that we pulled it off, and this we said we're going to submit. Now the question is, Eleanor raised an issue about who the individuals are. Even our last point that they had, in fact, my own article that I wrote, I said, will they be saying sorry when our water and electricity and land is stolen, as much as they said sorry for the hallucinations? There was more sorries for the hallucinations rather than what the impact this thing can have elsewhere. Put it out for public debate. But it looks like we'll have to engage these guys very directly and robustly on their campuses, etc. Invite them for debates, whether they want to come or not. That's where the level's at. Not that we're becoming AI policy centric, but these guys, once they make the policy, will have legitimation to the budgets, etc., etc. So it's a matter of strategy that we need to talk about. Come.
In the basics today, that every meeting has an output. And I like Hassan's declaration, even if it's a 5-sentence thing to say, this is what we write to the committee and say, fundamentally we believe, even if it's just one tenet, and it may be consent, that AI policy must, the declaration is like 4 points. Yeah. That we can see.
Is a practical thing. Oh, sorry, Natalia. Is that, I mean, the one thing we could say is, yes, it's good that experts have been set up and all that, but does this experts include, I mean, exactly what you said, social justice? It's not just about, we know these guys are experts and all that. So that's the question. And then the other thing he pointed out, and we are concerned also that even among these experts, the role of big tech and money, we want an independent and alternatively funded thing. I went to their last presentation, Vukusi and them, on where the project was, and I was happy to see, because I know they've been criticized for Google money and all, and I was happy to see that IDRC, Canada IDRCs, supporting them, and the British Foreign Office. And it's terrible that we're at a stage where the British Foreign Office is a good guy compared to those. I mean, this is the stage where we have reached. But anyway, I think those are the questions. The funding of the AI policy, we want to make sure that it's not US military involved. And so those points, if we can come up with that for this meeting, that's great. Yeah.
I think the second output I'd like, because I'm in agreement with that for this meeting, is that we make a specific, we meet again. When Joan comes, we have something very concrete that we can utilize her in a very sort of efficient way. So that's the first thing. And it's also just to note that neoliberalism is always looking at technocratic answers in health, and let the text do it, and then and it ignores the impact it has. So we're coming from the perspective that we want historians, social scientists, human beings, wisdom cultivators involved in the policy making. We don't just want a technocratic response to this, and it's therefore a political one. But the issue around Joan, I think, is very important. We need to be creative. I haven't finished yet. We need to be creative around
I've got some
how we.
suggestions on that we'll make up.
Yeah.
Could I just say let me address Joan. Joan, not I heard by mistake. Well, she advised because we became friends over trying to organize her for this. Some other people are inviting her. She'll be somewhere in Joburg. Okay, so we're going to be hijacking her for a meal or something to say thank you. So I don't control the program, and we'll check it out. Right? So that's it. That's the point. So firstly, that Abdullah. Secondly, let me tell you that. The things that we are suggesting here, we mustn't suggest it for others to do if each of us had not done it on our own, right? Because you have the right to advocate for your own grouping, what you believe in, and then ask us to support. What we are trying to do here is to see how we move together. And the agreement that we've got now, we're trying to go around this. And I think we need to be harder, not to say, are they social justice? We must say, from what we've seen, these guys do not represent what we want. And that will shock the brain. And we issued as a release so that the likes of Clement Manyatel and I've monitored all the shows on AI. None of them touch on the issues that we talk about. It's all about this bright lights of technology that Jim comes to Joba kind of stuff, the old things from the 1900s, right? So the point I'm making to you is that we need to stay focused. Some of your 5-line or 5 paragraphs, no, not paragraphs, but quite clearly, the issue that we do not believe that these names represent the best interest that we want, and we want to meet them.
No,
right?
just that they represent the tech part of this. That is not.
No, but they do represent money and Google. Yeah. Okay.
Listen,
Yeah.
we don't know, and that's a journey of discovery. What we can say is to say we are happy that this policy has been dropped and that there's a process of going forward, which we demand that becomes more inclusive. It's good that AI experts have been addressed, but our concerns are you also need expertise, environment, gender-based violence, social justice, extractive data center, all those things. And we are concerned about ensuring that the process is not funded by US military, by any military involvement. That's what we need. We don't have to make a judgment on these people because we're going to engage on them and we can challenge them when we engage. Yeah.
No, you said it.
Just also something to add.
If I can add, maybe it's military and tech companies that have already been identified as complicit in violations, in human rights violations, or gross human rights violations, and you can state it, apartheid, genocide, but, because they have been listed. Automated weaponry systems, the military industrial complex. No. Yeah. Hmm. We're saying we need an environmental expert, heritage expert, gender, people who specialize in children's rights, and human rights, human rights experts, basically. Yeah, and yeah, anti-colonial. Yeah.
We will try and define it collectively. Yeah. So Shama, so I think the question you're asking, so we'll issue this publicly, but the working group has an autonomous status, because I've written about who it is. So that's one, right? We're there, but also comprising of, and I know I can get SAFTU to sign on, because they were here. We can get others to sign on to that kind of thing. Okay.
Also, because